We have been traveling along with Jesus over the last couple of weeks, and we will continue to do so as we get closer and closer to Easter. We're using the Gospel of John as our guide, and we have so far traveled with Jesus. As we get to chapter 4 today, he has left his home area of Galilee, gone down to Jerusalem in Judea. He made his way back through Samaria and is now back in the region of Galilee. He's already done a miracle there, and he has preached all around as he traveled. So he is building up quite the reputation, and word is getting around that he has miraculous powers and a challenging, wise word to bring. So let's see what happens next. This is a reading from the Gospel according to John, chapter 4, verses 45 through 54. Hear now the word of the Lord. When Jesus arrived in Galilee, the Galileans welcomed him. They had seen all that he had done in Jerusalem at the Passover festival, for they also had been there. Once more he visited Cana in Galilee, where he had turned the water into wine. And there was a certain royal official whose son lay sick at Capernaum. When this man heard that Jesus had arrived in Galilee from Judea, he went to him and begged him to come and heal his son, who was close to death. "Unless you people see signs and wonders," Jesus told him, "you will never believe." The royal official said, "Sir, come down before my child dies." "Go," Jesus replied, "your son will live." The man took Jesus at his word and departed. While he was still on the way, his servants met him with the news that his boy was living. When he inquired as to the time when his son got better, they said to him, "Yesterday, at 1 p.m, the fever left him." Then the father realized that this was the exact time at which Jesus had said to him, "Your son will live." So he and his whole household believed. This was the second sign Jesus performed after coming from Judea to Galilee. So, word has gotten around that Jesus has divine powers. That's what this guy in our verses had heard. He's an important man in an important position whose son is near death, so he is desperate. When he learns that Jesus, the miracle worker, is back in town, he goes to ask for help. And we don't really know much about this man, except that it said he was a royal official. So he was probably appointed by the king to be in this region. So he's probably not from around there. He might be like a local magistrate who acts and judges or works on the king's behalf there in the area. The king at this point would have been the son of King Herod from the Christmas story, Herod II. And so if this guy, not from around here, big fancy schmancy royal official doing King Herod Jr.'s business, he's probably not going to be well liked amongst the local Galileans. But he has heard that Jesus can do amazing things, and that's what he needs today. Verse 46 says that the official and his son live in Capernaum. Jesus here is in Cana, and those villages were about 20 miles away from each other. So the official must have been determined enough to make the journey and track Jesus down. But who wouldn't go the distance, right? If you were desperate to save your child? Even people that you think are uncaring jerks out in the world, they would do whatever they could to save their own child. And this guy might have been seen as an uncaring jerk amongst the folks there, but he still does whatever might be able to help for his son. So he begs Jesus, it said in verse 47. And how does Jesus respond? Well, he kind of gets a little frustrated and responds to the man, but not to the question that the man asks. Verse 48, Jesus said, "Unless you people see miraculous signs and wonders, you'll never believe." It sounds like it's a not very nice response, like it's a little gruff. But if Jesus is saying you people, then that means you plural, not just you guy. He's talking to a group. He's talking to whoever the y'all was around him. If it was a big group, then it was all y'all that he was talking to, that he was standing amongst. Maybe all those people had gathered around him to see what neat thing Jesus might do next. Will he turn more water into wine like he did at that wedding at the beginning of chapter 2? Will he run this royal official off with a whip like he did to the money changers in the temple at the end of chapter 2? Whatever it is, I hope it's something awesome, they might have thought to themselves as they watched. But Jesus says, unless y'all see something awesome, you'll never believe. I assume he said, although it's not printed. I wonder if also God thinks that sometimes to us after we have prayed and demanded or complained. I wonder if God thinks, really? After all the blessings you have received, unless y'all see a new awesome thing, you won't believe that I'm still out there working and loving. And yet we still say to God, but what have you done for me lately? You know? Now the answer is a lot. We just don't notice. So maybe that's one reason for Jesus' frustration here. Because he doesn't like being prodded to do magic tricks just to impress people. But the official hasn't come to be impressed. Maybe the crowd that's around him has, but not this man. He just wants Jesus to go to his house and help his son. So he begs again in verse 49. And Jesus does heal his son. Simple as that. Does he do it by waving his hands with a big flash and a bang that the crowd was hoping for and a ta-da? No, he doesn't. It just happens. And he tells the man the good news, and he's done. As we kept reading, based on the report and the timing in verse 52, we can figure out the timeline of what happened next. The official spoke to Jesus, and his son was healed about 1 p.m. That's what the New International Version that I was reading from says. Other translations will say about the 7th hour of the day, which means 7 hours after sunrise, so about 1 p.m. And apparently, the official couldn't make it back to his house in Capernaum, that 20 miles, before the sun went down, so he arrives the next day. And before he even gets to his house, his servants meet him on the road, looking for him to tell him the good news that his son will live. That is great. What do you think the man felt when he heard that news? That his son wouldn't die, but had been restored to new life. I wonder if he fell down to his knees right there in the road and prayed and cried and thanked God for the healing. Maybe he hugged all of his servants because he was so excited and they were really uncomfortable because he'd never hugged them before. And it was a joyous moment. I don't know. I definitely think that he ran the rest of the way back home. He might have been walking fast and intentionally before that, but I bet he started running after he heard that good news. Because before, he had hope that his son was better. He had hope that Jesus meant what he said, but he didn't have the proof yet. He didn't know for sure. He had heard Jesus' blessing and words of healing, but he still had to walk all the way back home before he could see that transformation with his own eyes. And that's how we have to walk too sometimes. We have heard God's blessing and read words of healing, but we might not have seen it happen fully quite yet, at least maybe according to our schedule or how we would like for it to happen. So we have to keep walking. And sometimes we have to walk by faith and not by sight. As 2 Corinthians 5 says, we have to keep walking in life. And it's our faith, our hope that sustains us, like it did for the man. Hebrews 11:1 says that faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of things even that we do not see. That's what will help us keep going, even when we haven't yet seen what we hope for. Okay, so when Jesus told the man, "Your son will live," it said that the man took Jesus at his word and departed to go check. But it's not until he got home and sees his boy well again and hugs him that it then said, the man and all his household believed. So he took Jesus at his word, it said, in Cana, but didn't fully believe, it said, until he got home to Capernaum. So what did he do in between? He just kept walking. That's what he did. That's what he did in between hope and seeing and believing. He kept walking. He kept walking as he trusted and hoped in Jesus' power and God's care. Was he inspired to keep walking because of the dazzling, miraculous signs and wonders that he saw from Jesus? No, because he hadn't seen any. Jesus didn't make a spectacle of it. There was nothing flashy, nothing for the man to say, "Oh yeah, it's on now, let's go, all right." No, all he carried was trust in Jesus and hope for healing. And that's what we can carry too. So what can we learn from him, this royal official? Well, we can learn that sometimes when things are tough and you really need something, you just got to put your walking shoes on and go find Jesus and connect with him. Speak to him. You have to get out of your house or your workplace or your comfort zone and connect with Jesus by seeking him out. He might be off in the world, working in the hearts of people, who knows where, traveling around like he was in our verses. He might be right next door. He might be outside in a quiet place. But you have to find Jesus in your heart and with your heart. Talk with him, connect with him, and ask for help. Don't just try to phone it in. Don't feel like you have submitted the prayer paperwork and sent it off and await a response. We know the royal official has servants at his house, so he could have just given them the order. Hey, you guys go track down that Jesus guy, make him come help. He didn't do that. He went out himself. He walked the miles himself. He begged Jesus himself. First, he heard something else that Jesus was thinking about, And it could have been a little off-putting. It could have disappointed him and made him turn away. But he stayed, and he kept asking, it said, and he kept talking with Jesus. Maybe it's like sometimes when you pray a whole lot about something, and you've put a lot of hours into talking to God about it, and it doesn't go the way you wanted it to. Well, don't give up. Keep praying. Keep talking with the Lord. Don't give up. I read a recent story that encouraged the same thing from a religion professor at Mercer University in Georgia. His name is Richard Wilson, and he has spent decades developing a relationship with the people of Liberia that helped him redefine what it means to have hope and to not give up. He said the relationship started 30 years ago when he met a new transfer student to Mercer who was from Liberia and named Olu. Olu was a refugee from Liberia's civil wars that had ravaged the country for 14 long years. Those wars and other factors had caused crippling levels of poverty, 80% unemployment, unsafe water, little medical supplies, and high rates of illiteracy. The conditions of Liberia were so bad that the magazine Business Insider called it the second most miserable place on earth, which was a terrible thing to say. Fortunately for Olu, he made it to the U.S., and as a student at Mercer, taking Dr. Wilson's classes, he majored in religion, went on to seminary. He kept in touch with Dr. Wilson over the years as he moved back to Liberia to help his country, eventually became a school principal, and then went on to become the president of the Liberian Baptist Convention. And that's when he invited Dr. Wilson to come for a visit. The first time he went, Richard Wilson said, "It was crushing. Liberia is such a hard place to live," he said, and that he wanted to leave as soon as possible. But Olu said, "You're looking at the wrong things. Notice how each day things get a little better." Dr. Wilson then learned about this Liberian concept of small, they called it. That's how they measure progress in Liberia. Olu said, "Did you see the fresh paint on that wall? Did you notice that the grass had been cut?" Small changes. And indeed, Dr. Wilson started looking around a little differently and noticing those small changes that were happening. After his first trip ended, he made plans for another trip, and then another, and another. And he keeps going back, sometimes with a mission work group, sometimes just by himself to teach classes there at their universities. Dr. Wilson said that the cliche, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, is a daily reality in Liberia. But that Liberians are willing to walk those 2 steps each day, even if by the next day only 1 step of progress remains. So he said, "I have been stunned by the resilience of Liberians. They teach me about endurance and character. They have taught me to hope in ways I could have never imagined." Every day, Liberians are striving to make progress as a country. Isn't that incredible? Despite all that they have been through, all the violence and suffering, that they would still keep working and not give up hope. That should be very humbling to us. How easy we have it here in comparison. but they don't give up. So let us learn from them. Just like the man in our story who didn't give up, let us learn from him too and keep walking step by step, noticing and being grateful even for small changes. And finally, let us also learn from Jesus in this story. He shows us here that sometimes healing can come from a distance when you're not even there. That you don't have to see miraculous signs and wonders to experience God's blessings. If you think you do, and you're waiting to be wowed like the people of the crowd, then also like them, you might find yourself disappointed. So instead of that, instead of waiting for wonders before you experience God's blessings, look for God's blessings that are all around you right now in your life, and keep walking with the hope that God is working and moving in the world, even healing the world, even healing others from a distance, out of our sight, in ways that we might not even know. I know it would be easier to just have everything that we want, the way we want it, already today, right in front of us, perfect. That would be great. But life doesn't work that way. Nevertheless, God tells us that healing is happening. God is indeed at work right now, even if we can't see it yet. So we might just have to walk by faith for a while. And as you walk, let the power of God's hope sustain you farther than you thought you could go. And every day, notice how in small ways, life is getting better. Let us pray. Oh God, we confess that so often we don't have the patience or the motivation to keep walking, to keep working, to keep at it, seeking your presence and doing your will. We confess that we give up so easily. So remind us, O God, that you are always at work in the world, that you are always with us and loving us, and that you are blessing us often in ways that we don't even notice. So help us to notice, O God. Open our eyes, strengthen our feet, so that our hope in you will carry us. And as the days go by, the blessings that we see will grow our belief, and help us to keep walking and to keep working so that the blessings may continue. Amen.